Ridge Racer was released in 1995 for the Sony Playstation by Namco. Its sequel, Ridge Racer Revolution, was released a year later. In this review, I will look at both the crowning jewel of the PlayStation launch lineup and its follow-up. Ridge Racer was the ideal game to show off the PlayStation hardware. It's colorful, the frame rate is smooth, the polygons crisp, the textures detailed, and the gameplay fast. For those who bought the PlayStation at launch and were looking for that wow factor, Ridge Racer was it. Other 3D consoles existed before, but none had delivered such a relatively reasonable 3D facsimile of everyday environments. Graphically, this was light years beyond 16-bit consoles, and a large step ahead of the Jaguar, 3DO, and even the Sega Saturn. It's also a game trapped between eras. The PlayStation generation started to see a shift to games designed more specifically for home use instead of straight arcade ports. On Genesis and Super Nintendo, ports like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter dominated sales. But arcade games were not about deep experiences. It is unrealistic to have even 5-hour experiences from an arcade. The technology behind the PlayStation and its CD storage allowed for much more meaty games. Ridge Racer did not live up to that promise. Comparing Ridge Racer to the series' final PlayStation entry, Type 4, lays this bare. Ridge Racer has 13 cars total, but only 4 are easily playable. Type 4 has 321. Ridge Racer has 1 course with a brief extension on the hardest difficulty. You can race a track backwards too. Type 4 has 8 courses. Type 4 has a Grand Prix mode with qualifying races in differing stages, along with a single race and multiplayer mode. Ridge Racer has a single race mode against 11 other cars and a TT mode that isn't a time trial, it's a single race against 1 other car on the extended track. There is no multiplayer. There were very different expectations for content at the dawn of the 32-bit consoles. Your typical 16-bit game would take much less than 10 hours to complete. You can experience everything this game has to offer in an hour and a half, and it isn't very difficult. Ridge Racer skated because of the awe factor. What content Ridge Racer does have is fantastic. Racing feels smooth, even without the use of an analog stick. Its drift mechanics are primitive, but work. Coming out of a drift, your car will swerve back and forth. Your job is to control it so you are facing forward as it regains traction. It sounds weird, and is definitely unrealistic, but works acceptably as a game mechanic. The track is meticulously designed in an attractive setting. Its music is what you'd expect was going through the head of a 4-year-old during a sugar rush. It's hype. It also has some cleverness. A screen of Galaxian pops up as the game loads to keep you occupied. Successfully blast all the ships, and you have unlocked 8 of the secret cars, some of which feature characters from other Namco games. Once Ridge Racer has finished loading, it will never load again. There's really not much data, so it managed to load the entire game into system memory. It streams its music off the disc, which means once the game loads, you can replace it with any music CD. This wasn't an intended feature, but it's fun nonetheless. It doesn't work perfectly. The music on the Ridge Racer CD doesn't start at 0, so it will start playing in the middle of songs. It was fun to see which of my CDs would fit the game the best. Red Hot Minute by the Red Hot Chili Peppers worked the best for me. Ridge Racer got away with a lot because it was a flashy launch title that included genuinely fun gameplay. Ridge Racer Revolution does not have that excuse. I almost hesitate to call Ridge Racer Revolution a sequel. It features 15 cars to Ridge Racer's 13. 12 are exactly the same. It features 1 course with 2 different extensions rather than 1. The course is new, but assets from the original are clearly used. Some parts of the track look almost identical to its predecessor. Its only clear addition is a rear view mirror in the cockpit view. The game modes are exactly the same, except you can play TT mode on any track variant. You could play Galaxian as the original loaded. Here you can play Galaga 88. It unlocks the same cars as the first. The music CD swap trick from the original no longer works. Revolution needs to load, though rarely. The world was already evolving by this point, especially on the PlayStation. Wipeout released just a couple months later than Ridge Racer and featured more courses and vehicles, but the same high-quality racing content. Wipeout XL released on the same day as Revolution and put it to shame. Jet Moto released a month later and also put it to shame. You would think with the reuse of assets, they could put more in the game, but they didn't. It plays like a straight arcade port, but Revolution was made specifically for the home. Its positives are the same as the original. The smooth racing with weird drift mechanics remain unmodified. The cars look nice, slightly nicer than in the first. The course's setting hits the same general notes, but looks slightly nicer. It has slightly more cars, and the textures on the cars are slightly clearer. The music is slightly more hype. Now it sounds more like a coke-fueled police chase. Ridge Racer Revolution is copied homework. The identical cars and strongly reminiscent course make it almost a remake of a year-old game. It adds almost nothing to a game that was absolutely desperate for more content. I can't think of a more unnecessary game. This is the first part of a two-part review. Next week, I will look at a contemporary game of Ridge Racer that similarly released a pseudo-sequel 1 year after the original. Did they fare better? We will see.